when you do actually give that value back to your community instead of taking it for yourself, you've created one of the most powerful incentive mechanisms, and you've created a vehicle that will actually bring your community out of poverty through shared values. And this was what blockchain technologies were always intended to realize. This was the foundation.
Wise Talks, cross-cultural wisdom for a harmonious world.
Welcome to Wise Talks, where today we are heading into the wild world of blockchain with Kavon Soltani. Kavon is a notable blockchain entrepreneur, having co-founded the Aventus protocol in 2017. He played a key role in developing the token-curated registry, a pioneering mechanism designed to address the velocity issue with tokens. At 55 Foundry, he contributed to multiple projects, including NFT marketplaces for AAA gaming publishers and content consumption creation DAO ecosystem for high-value IP. More recently, Kavon has worked closely with the Roundable Maori Tribe Governance DAO and several projects leveraging tokens and DAO governance vehicles for Grant Cardone Ventures. What I'm dying to find out today, can the blockchain technology really can make this world more harmonious, or it is a scam like many people think? Let's find out. Welcome to Wise Talk, Kavon.
Thanks so much. Excited to be here.
Yes, let's have some fun, and I got some interesting questions for you.
You always do. All right, let's go.
But first, just tell us about your youth and how did you grow up, about your parents, and did you always have interest in technology?
Yeah, absolutely. Happy to. My parents were both immigrants from Iran, who both came to the United States, during the Iran hostage crisis. And so they were really focused on making sure that my brothers and I had the best chance at being able to create lives for ourselves. And so they very heavily stressed maths, sciences, but also creativity. And I was very lucky in that I was a piano player. I was able to go and snowboard and wakeboard, and I got all of my physical and creative outlets. And I'm really grateful to my family for allowing me to have a life that enabled that. And really, when it came to college, I actually had zero intention of going into technology. I was very much obsessed with the idea of hosting music festivals. And so I was actually working with a number of venues and putting on smaller festivals, and very quickly realized that is not how I want to spend the rest of my life, and decided to head back to college. And that's when I discovered blockchain technologies and really what these technologies could actually do for the world. And especially being a naive kid in college, my mind was swimming with all of the ideas. And so that was really how I found my way to the technology landscape and blockchain technology specifically.
What initially sparked your interest in blockchain technology?
It was actually my brother. My brother was an earlier adopter of blockchain technologies than I was, though only by a year or so. And I remember it was around 2015 or so where he came to me and he was saying, Kavon, you've got to check out this thing called Ethereum. It's going to change the world. And at the time he was working at Consensus, which was an organization in New York that was founded by Joseph Lubin, who was one of the founders of Ethereum. And so we had a really, he was just so gung-ho and excited about everything that he was talking about. And I was on the verge of graduating. So I was like, well, I've been already exploring these technologies. I haven't explored Ethereum too substantially yet. I was really focused on Bitcoin at the time. And then I started delving into Ethereum and I saw the true scope of what was actually possible. And so that was kind of all she wrote. And when I graduated, I decided I'm going straight for blockchain technologies. I actually decided to turn down a number of corporate offers that I was given, much to the fury of my parents that were not happy with the decision I was making.
And what did you study in the college?
Entertainment business. So I was really heavily focused on really IP values and the attribution of those IPs and the creation of new content IP. Which felt like such a powerful analog when we started dealing with blockchain technologies, as tokens represent one of the most ideal attribution vehicles for value that's created, right? So, there's a lot of explorations that have taken place with IBM, ASCAP, BMI, exploring using blockchain infrastructures for the subsequent allocation of royalties, as an example.
Amazing. So basically your interest was more in kind of like using technology to build and improve things than to invest and make money.
Oh, absolutely. And really around creating like a new way of engaging with commerce, right? The idea that, you could actually spin up an ecosystem with a token behind it and incentivize and galvanize an entire community behind you, was unheard of before then. And so there was really just the level of grandiosity, especially in the early stages of, what can be achieved. And it was infectious. It was impossible to stay out of it.
What were some of the biggest challenges or misconceptions you faced early on?
When it comes to incentive design, especially in the early stages of token developments and kind of best practices, there was almost this expectation that, and this is particularly relevant with DAO ecosystems, that, if users had a sense of ownership around a shared value or shared activities, that this would then encourage those users to go and want to participate and want to vote and actually take time out of their day to engage within your ecosystem. And what we came to find was that that wasn't always the case. And in large part, what we came to realize was that there's really, a twofold approach that you have to take when you're architecting a community like this. And on one side of it, there is the influence. So ensuring that your token holders and your community has enough influence exerted throughout their token ownership that they can feel that, a degree of resonance, that they were involved and they contributed to the development of your project. And, that shared value and love for this ecosystem will yield dividends. But there's also another side of it. And this is the side that unfortunately was largely segregated from design practices in the early stages, and that was the financial component. These tokens represent value. And when that value is being attributed poorly or incorrectly, or in ways that only will benefit the few at the top, this will obviously have a cascading impact throughout your ecosystem.
That's what was happening many times.
Repeatedly. And so, this was really, this was a really powerful learning experience for, while we were deploying quite a few of these tokens. And it was actually, especially in the early stages, it wasn't done through, this idea of nefarious intent. In large part, and I'll even speak for myself, some of the mistakes that we made were, we didn't really care so much about the value of the token. The value was in the ecosystem and in allowing community to come together and vote accordingly. And what we found was that when the economics were an afterthought, the entire model fell apart. And so this really changed the nature of the conversation when it came to incentive design and ownership. We came to realize that, the economics aren't just an afterthought. This is a core component of you as a token holder, as a member of this community, not only being able to exert your influence, but being able to feel rewarded for that participation. And so I would say that was probably one of the biggest early misconceptions and learnings that we had when starting to build out some of these communities.
What advice would you give to yourself, to your young self, entering the blockchain world? I'm pretty sure you've done some mistakes maybe, or...
Oh God, more than I can count. The big thing I would say would be patient. I actually had a really interesting conversation with a friend of mine from college after, I'd founded a few of these projects and, really learned what it truly took to run a company. And I went home just to meet with a few friends, and, we went out to the old bars we used to go to. We had a few drinks, and I remember, one of my oldest friends, he just kind of turns to me and he was like, Kavon, you kind of did what everyone said you couldn't do. How the hell did you do this? He was a little drunk. This is a good friend of mine that I grew up with. So he was almost like, a little bit like, all right, don't get too cocky, but really, what did you do? And I'd been drinking, and I just looked him in the eye without shaking a breath. I was like, dude, I failed more times than you've tried. I have done, every conceivable ideation, variation of these projects. We really, over the course of these years, deployed, I won't say every conceivable variation, but every one that came to our minds. And 9 out of every 10 of these deployments would end in failure, but we learned. We learned what wouldn't fail. And in doing so, shortly thereafter, 3 out of every project succeeded. And then a few years later, 6 out of every project would succeed. And so, really the best advice I could give myself is, be patient. And it's especially hard, especially when you're dealing with crypto, because you're constantly inundated with these people that are making tens of millions of dollars. Your crypto bros, they're all over Instagram. That's not the real world. Those are finite, unsustainable
models by which a few people have been able to enrich themselves. But attempting to replicate that, not only are you going to hurt yourself and your own integrity, but you're also not going to be able to sustain that. And no one is ever going to want to work with you again. So really, in large part, the message is patience and trust yourself. Believe in yourself. This isn't rocket science. Anybody can do this. You just have to put in the time and the effort to learn.
So can you say that up till now it was like Wild West in crypto space?
Oh, absolutely.
And it was a lot of bad actors and also like people who didn't know how to really run the companies. And now things are changing, or how do you see that?
Well, it's interesting. I don't necessarily want to characterize the entire landscape as bad actors, although there were many. But it kind of comes back to, actually, it's an interesting segue coming from the previous question, right? Like, what would I tell people who are new to the space? Be patient, and how hard that is, especially when you're constantly being inundated with content on social media that's showing how much money people are making. This is actually in large part, I think, the motivation that led to a number of the quote unquote bad actors that we've seen, and not through any immediate nefarious motivation. People are human. When you see a revenue opportunity, when you see a chance, I can deploy this token and I'm going to make $60,000 off of it. Or I can make $100,000 off it, decide to keep a little bit more. Or I can make $150,000 if I keep a little. And this thought process just continues to propagate and propagate until you end up with meme coins, right? Where deployers are now bundling 80% of the supply for themselves and dumping that on the markets. Now, those are very nefarious actions, but they were born really, I think, out of a sense of exploration. The blockchain space is so nascent, so new, and the mechanism designs that are being explored have so much potential that, like I said, people, and like I have done, in large part, people are throwing darts at a dartboard. We're just trying to see what works, what doesn't, which speaks to the Wild West. Now you have bad actors and you have good actors.
Right.
I will speak for myself. I will never be comfortable with a practice that is going to extract value from my communities. But that doesn't mean that there aren't others out there that will. And so when we conduct our experiments, they're very much from the perspective of how do we create shared value for all parties. And this is what we're starting to see now, is this evolution from thought experiments of how do I maximize revenues for myself and how do I, actually create mechanism design that can flow funds through these predetermined pathways to, the requisite audiences. That's all kind of in the past now. We've done those explorations and we've now moved into a place of practical reality, which is you can do a meme coin. You can keep 80% of that supply for yourself, but nobody's going to engage with it because people have seen this happen. What we're now starting to see are far more egalitarian token deployments. And this is what we're doing, as you know, with the token model for WISE, is that 50% of the tokens are going to be made available for the community. That's not for us. We're not making that money. You're making that money. Now, what's really hard about this and why we haven't really seen this happen before is that can be worth a lot of money. If we look at an example like one of these big meme coins, right, that hit, let's say $1 billion market cap, well, 80% of that supply, that's $800 million. That's a big number to say no to. But when you do actually give that value back to your community instead of taking it for yourself, you've created one of the most powerful incentive mechanisms, and you've created a vehicle that will actually bring your community out of poverty through shared values. And this was what blockchain technologies were always intended to realize. This was the foundation. But there are always the path to progress is never going to be linear. You're always going to take turns. You're going to go backwards. You're going to take 2 steps forward, 1 step back, and 3 steps forward, and 6 steps back. But we're moving forward, and that's the important part. And now we're seeing deployments like WISE that are substantially more egalitarian in the way that their tokens are being distributed.
For those who doesn't know, maybe you can explain a little bit about what is meme coin, for example, because some people doesn't know at all.
Meme coins are interesting. I'm actually not part of, I don't necessarily subscribe to that community that's just all doom when it comes to meme coins. I actually found them to be quite interesting for a couple of reasons. Not so much the economic considerations, but fundamentally a meme coin is this idea that you're going to have a meme. Give a picture. Let's say we have the Wise logo here. We're going to create a token around this, and we're going to bring on a ton of influencers and KOLs, and we're going to go on public AMAs, and we're going to go on Twitter Spaces, and we're going to tell the whole world about how great this token is. But with a meme coin, the foundation of a meme coin is that there's no onus on the user. I don't have to do anything. I'm buying the token, number goes up, I sell token, number goes down. Now, if you get enough people to buy the token, then the number is going to go up quite a bit. Now, what this leads to, and what's really interesting around the mechanism design around this, is that you've actually created a vehicle for community generation that rewards your community for actively participating in this ecosystem, right? The problem with this is that, again, people saw money. People saw revenue figures. Let's assume I'm the deployer of a meme coin, okay? I am creating 1 billion tokens as part of the smart contract. I'm going to be deploying it. I am probably going to bundle a substantial amount of those tokens from the early onset, because I can have, being the deployer, I can buy to 80% of those tokens without anybody else knowing it. But I don't want everybody to know that I just did that, because now it's going to be very clear, hey, I can dump 80% of the supply into the chart and it'll crash it and you'll have nothing left. So anybody who sees that is going to be concerned. They're not going to want to invest in that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get a couple thousand aged wallets, and then I'm going to put 0.5 to 0.6 to 0.8% of that 80% total supply pool that I have across those aged wallets. Well, now, if you're going to want to go and conduct diligence to see this, you're going to see, well, there's thousands of people holding this token. This gives me the confidence to buy it. This is the trap that unfortunately has now pervaded the meme coin ecosystem, that leads to deployers have rugging, or it's called a rug pull. They do a rug pull, where they'll then sell that 80% of the supply into the chart. They walk away with whatever's in the liquidity pool, 8, 10, 20, however many millions of dollars. And now everybody else holding that token is stuck holding a worthless token. Right. Now, this is, I think, a pretty important discussion to have, because I think that it really helps surface, really what this technology is at its core, which is that this technology is a tool. It can help, it can do great things, or it can do not so great things, depending on who is responsible for architecture.
Yeah, so meme coins is like more like gambling and fun, basically.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, it's not like full utilization of the blockchain technology.
Absolutely. Yeah. But now imagine if a meme coin did what we're doing, where instead of taking that 80% of the supply that we bundled, we give it to the community. Now that community is going to make all of that money. What motivation do they now have to sell? This is why I actually do give a pretty substantial nod to the meme coin community, because what they did was create a community growth tool. Now, we don't necessarily need to leverage all of the predatory tokenomics associated with that, but we can leverage that growth tool and be more egalitarian with our token distributions, so that now, instead of the deployers ourselves walking away with tens of millions of dollars, the community can see that. And now that the community can see that reward, they're going to want to support. They're going to want to see these ecosystems explode, because we're not only supporting them, but we're also supporting the shared values and ideologies that brought us here in the first place.
Everyone is growing together.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly.
Rising.
A rising tide lifts all boats.
Can you explain the tokenization and the blockchain? The way I'm explaining to people, like token, it's like a share in a company. It's like one of the ways.
It can be.
Yeah.
It certainly can be. It doesn't necessarily have to be. So the way that I would actually, at a very base layer explain blockchain tech, it's a ledger. It's a sequential ordering of transactions. Transaction A, B, C, D, E, F, G. Now, this allows us a few things. This allows us transparency, auditability, confirmation that transactions have taken place. And the use of this technology has now proliferated through token deployments and everything imaginable under the sun. Now, a token is very different. A token is really up to the discretion of whatever we want it to be as a deployer. You can have a token that represents influence, ownership. You can have a token that represents none of the above and is simply a staking
programming
vehicle.
Like smart contract, right?
I'm sorry?
So it's like you programming the smart contract?
Well, every token is a programmed smart contract, yes. So every token that you put out, you're deploying a smart contract onto the chain. And that has now created this token in accordance with the rules that you set ahead of time. And proper smart contract development is going to be immutable, which means that you followed best practices and you have ensured that
as the deployer, you do not have a back door that you could go in and later exploit.
Yeah, and it's transparent, basically.
Exactly. But when it comes to these tokens are so varied. You can do anything you want. And that's why it's a little bit hard to explain them in a way that, will universally explain, like, well, what is a token? A token, if I had to explain it, or try to, I guess, summarize it into, one bullet point, would be a token is a incentive mechanism. It is used to incentivize users and communities to perform the actions that are not only going to help them, but are going to help propel the ecosystem forward. And that incentive can be custom fit for whatever your community is. So I know that that's not very detailed, but I hope that helps answer that question in a way that's digestible.
Yeah. What is the most exciting developments you are seeing in the blockchain right now?
I've been really excited about mission coins. Mission coins are fairly new. There really haven't been many big examples, but honestly, it's something that I think is going to become quite big here in the near future. And mission coins are essentially, exactly what we've largely been kind of talking about here. It's a community-led token deployment in which, for example, we as Wise are a mission coin. We have our mission of, creating the best possible life and creating a world of harmony and allowing people to have access and exposure to ancient wisdom and these tools that allow them to live their best lives. That is our mission. And we've architected now this token that is going to represent the backbone for user participation. And that is really the foundation of what a mission coin is that you have a token that is used as a utility for a shared value, a shared goal, a shared mission. And it's very egalitarian in its tokenomics and its distribution. So again, when we think about, typical tokens like, the meme coins where the deployer is going to keep 80%, this is the exact opposite. Oftentimes the deploying teams are going to be keeping 20, maybe 30% at most, and the bulk of the rest of the tokens are going to be made available for community earnings, and the communities will have to go and perform various actions within those ecosystems in order to qualify to earn those tokens.
Can you give some examples of the actions?
Well, right now, so there's one that I really like, Flying Pigs, which in Flying Pigs, they're building a perpetual engine of funding for impact initiatives. And so this model is predicated on incentivizing users to go in and vote on which organization is going to get the donation for this month, right? So it could be wildlife, it could be humanity, it could be clean up ocean plastics. And it's up to the communities to go in and say, well, we really like this organization, we really like this guy's mission, we're going to vote for it. But to vote for it, they need to stake their tokens. So now they're taking their tokens and they're voting and they're staking those tokens so that they're actively participating. Now, once the voting period concludes, every single token holder who voted is going to be rewarded for voting. They receive a set number of tokens based on an emissions pool. And that pool is 80% of the token supply. So these guys have essentially done what we're talking about here, which is completely flipping the script and creating a vehicle to incentivize and reward your users for participating in a shared mission, which in this case is funding impact initiatives. So that's probably one of my favorite examples. Murad Mahmudov actually had a really interesting talk around mission coins at Singapore 2049 last year. Maybe we can pin that in the description here. If anybody has interest, they can take a look at that. So that's one area that I'm pretty excited by. The other is real world asset tokenization. There are a lot of interesting explorations there right now. None that I think are necessarily worth delving too deeply into. The bulk of them are really, fractional ownership models. But the idea that you can now have access to these iconic real world assets, like I'll give you an example, one of which that I think is really interesting that I'm tangentially involved with, is a dinosaur, dinosaur fossil. And this is a $50 million fossil of a real dinosaur that was taken out of the ground that has been
just one dinosaur?
Just one dinosaur to begin with, that has been in the private collection of various individuals for the past, X number of years that it's been circulating, and it hasn't gone on display. Now, imagine if you could actually own a piece of that dinosaur, and then you were entitled to dividends and from revenues associated with that dinosaur, of which there are actually, shockingly, quite a bit of revenue associated with that.
This now introduces, such an amazing opportunity for democratization of investment opportunities and access. And this is, coming back to kind of, what inspired me in the early days. It was democratization. It was like, hey, I don't have to be an accredited investor. I can go and have exposure to these different passive yield opportunities that will enrich my life and create a better quality of life for myself and my family. And now with some of these initiatives with respect to real world asset tokenization, I mean, the dinosaur is just, one example of like, how many people walk around, they're like, yeah, I own a piece of a dinosaur. But soon it's going to extend to commercial real estate. Soon it's going to be, own a piece of a bridge, own a piece of a brand. And that's, I'm awesome. Really excited and motivated to see, where that's going to go.
Yeah. And you can invest pretty much like $50 in something that you really like. Yeah.
Exactly. And then you get to get a proportional return.
What are some of the biggest obstacles holding back mainstream blockchain adoption?
Definitely regulatory uncertainty. That has been a big question mark. With the incoming administration, that's also thrown a bit of a wrench, as now the prevailing sentiment is basically, kind of there's where we're back in Wild West territory, essentially. It's really challenging to build in accordance with long-term sustainable values. And the reason being that we really don't know what the regulatory landscape is going to be from administration to administration. And especially when you're starting to deal with, anything that has some type of a passive yield associated with it. You're pretty smack dab in securities territory at that point. And so, insofar as these assets are being classified as commodities or by virtue of meeting one or two of the tenets of the Howey test being considered securities, this has really stifled innovation, developments, and has made a lot of teams nervous about building because, whatever we may build today, tomorrow might be illegal. And nobody wants to be on that side of the fence. So, I think, definitely say the uncertainty is a big issue. But then likewise, I would say, and this is a bit more challenging to define, but I would say, overall technical adeptness of communities. Now, when we first started deploying tokens, MetaMask was in its infancy. The idea that you had multiple wallets you could engage with was a joke. Like that wasn't happening. Like you had so few options available to you. The user experience was so challenging.
It was very complicated.
Oh my God, yeah. And it's gotten a lot better, but it's still complex. I mean, especially when you're talking about it from the perspective of, a non-native user. Now, the nice thing is that as Gen Z has kind of matured and has now become a dominant consumer, Gen Z, obviously millennials, Gen A, we grew up with these technologies and, even in their more, I would say, historical forms like in gaming, if you have a battle pass or a level progressioning system or a wallet that you're collecting, funds in, we have these types of analogs and associations that make, understanding crypto a lot easier. And as we're starting to see these demographics growing and have a larger say in consumer economics, we're seeing more adoption of these technologies. But I would say those, really have been the two biggest blockers so far is just the sheer friction of the UX and how few people have a disposition to navigate these technologies effectively, and then the regulatory uncertainty.
And do you think it's better to build the projects that are not fully dependent on the token? Like, for example, if regulatory compliance is going to change, you can still continue doing business?
It depends. These tokens are so custom oriented and fit for purpose when it comes to the builds that, in certain cases, there was a funny talking point that we used to go through a couple of years ago, where we would essentially have a test of our deployments, where the question would be, can this deployment exist with or without your token? Now, in those days, the answer needed to be no, because your token represented utility. And in the event that you were able to navigate your ecosystem in the absence of that utility, well, it no longer qualifies as a utility, and therefore now you're back in securities territory. I would say that now that answer has changed. Because, and in large part, again, because the token shouldn't necessarily be viewed exclusively as a revenue generator. The token's an incentive tool. The token is a reward vehicle. But there's a big difference between creating a protocol that is entirely predicated on maximizing your revenues from staking your tokens and an ecosystem like Wise, for example, in which the token is complementary, but the foundational value proposition exists with or without the token. So all of this to say that, really in large part, I think it depends on what it is exactly you're doing and what ecosystem you're functioning within. If you're in the DeFi space, frankly, there's really no point to deploying in DeFi without a token. But if you're trying to deploy an ecosystem, if you're trying to create a new product or a new brand, absolutely, I believe the token should be complementary and not the core value proposition.
NFTs, DeFi, Metaverse, DAOs, which do you see having the most significant long-term impact and why?
Oh, God. Ooh, that's tough. That's really tough. I mean, honestly, I see them all being extremely important. Metaverse and NFT ecosystems, I mean, the applications for those types of technologies is universal. One of the projects that we worked on years ago, as I mentioned, or you alluded to in the bio here, was Tracer, where it was a provenance asset. And this actually applies to a lot of supply chains as well. If you, one of the things that I always loved about, fair trade and these types of standards bodies is that, they're really predicated on creating shared values for everybody. Right? They're trying to tell you what is going to be good for you and what is going to be bad for you. In the case of Tracer, it was elimination of conflict zone diamonds. But this technology can be applied to anything. We can apply it to wine. We can apply it to corn. We can apply it to tobacco. We can apply it to any type of agricultural yield. And you can start to create these types of standards and bodies. And all of these are, predicated on NFTs. Now, that's one tiny application of what NFTs can do. I mean, in a gaming ecosystem, in a metaverse environment, my God, NFTs become, largely your entry point. NFTs can become your access key. They can become badges of rewards. They can become value drivers. They can become staking multipliers. DAOs, likewise, when it comes to these types of, governance vehicles and coordinating large groups and communities, again, I see becoming very instrumental in, frankly, the way that we engage in all forms of commerce in the near future. So actually, if I was to be honest, what I would actually say is I feel that each and every one of those segments that you just described, I expect is going to become part of our daily vernacular in the next 3 to 5 years. And in large part, it's almost similar to cloud computing with respect to, when cloud computing was all the rage, back in the early 2000s, everybody was like, oh, we're a cloud computing project. We're doing cloud compute. Now, nobody is ever going to talk to you about, everybody just has it. It's just built in. It's just part of your foundational system. So I expect a lot of these mechanisms that we're alluding to, likewise, you're not even going to think about it as blockchain or NFTs. You're going to be like, that's my badge. That's my key. That's my vote. And we're going to start to, view these things more synonymously with their actual function as opposed to their technology, if that makes sense.
So basically, there is no way, that the blockchain is not going to be spread it globally or, not accepted, by other countries or people. So
well, they can certainly try, and I expect they will. And there's going to be many, many, many variations. Honestly, I expect in the near future, we're going to start to see standards and regulation coming down the pipeline. Well, we'll see what happens with the Trump administration, but the rest of the world, I expect we'll see some regulation coming down.
If it's way better technology, why not to use it, right?
Because it also gives a lot of power back to the people. And that's not necessarily what a lot of these governments want, right? Like, let's look at North Korea as an example.
Right.
This technology can set you free. It can also enslave you. This could be Big Brother. You can take blockchain technologies and you can, for example, if, some authoritarian actor wanted, they could say, hey, we're going to transfer every single form of commerce in this country is now going to take place digitally. And in order to engage with that form of digital commerce, you're going to need to have these cards. And guess what? We track every single penny that goes through this. You now are incapable of engaging in commerce outside of going through these vehicles, that now Big Brother is watching every single thing you do. And if you engage in somebody, subscribe to maybe a podcast that they don't like, spend money on a product that doesn't align with the regime, you are now going to be, they're going to know. And so, it's the case of all technologies, right? Nuclear technology can power a city or it could wipe out a continent. And so, do I expect that we're going to see global adoption of blockchain technologies? I think it's inevitable. I don't think it's possible not to at this point. But what form will it take is going to be variable. I do expect that we're going to see, there's specific chains that we may only be allowed to deploy key products through as it relates to key jurisdictions. That they'll say, hey, you can deploy this, but you have to use our protocol. If we're in the EU, for example, or if we're in Dubai, for example, that may very well be the case. Now, at the same time, I also very much expect, again, inevitably, we're going to see decentralized systems that are also going to propagate. But, again, if you are under a more authoritarian regime and you're engaging in commerce outside of the predetermined commerce pathways, that's also a jailable offense. So,
basically, it depends what you choose. If you choose more freedom and more transparency.
And it also depends on how these governments and these countries are going to choose to treat these.
Yeah, but you always can choose to live in another place.
Absolutely. And hopefully this is going to become a strong motivation to do so. When you have a choice of living in a free market or an authoritarian, it's a pretty easy choice for me.
Yeah, it's like at the same time on Earth, there is a paradise and also hell, and you can choose,
Exactly.
your reality.
It's like, let me go live at the place where they're watching every single penny I spend. That sounds fun. Right. No, I'm absolutely going to gravitate towards the place that is going to give me those kinds of freedoms. And, these are some of, the motivations which I'm hoping are going to lead to more egalitarian-based systems in the Western world.
What are your thoughts on the environmental impact of the blockchain?
Well, it's not great. This is the energy consumption for blockchains has definitely been a problem from the onset. Proof of stake has helped. Ethereum did make that transition. We also are seeing layer 2s and layer 3s that are popping up that are helping as well. There have been a number of alternative chains, both layer 1s and layer 2 through 3s that have popped up with their own consensus algorithms and means of limiting that energy consumption. But yeah, it's definitely a problem, and one that unfortunately I'm not very educated on, so I don't necessarily know what the latest and greatest that people are doing there.
Do you know the difference between like AI consumption of the electricity versus to blockchain?
I do not know, but I would imagine that it's probably comparable. And I could be completely wrong there. Yeah, I certainly could. But and especially if we're talking about a proof of work algorithm, consensus algorithm, because there's differences, right? Like the reason why it's so computationally intensive is through the consensus algorithms, and that's how you achieve confirmation. So for example, let's say that you and I completely independently want to submit a transaction to the Bitcoin chain, which is proof of work. And we have a few miners that are, just kind of hanging out, and these are the guys that are going to be mining and, competing to mine, confirm our transaction. The way that a mining system works is there's basically a puzzle. There's this massive, massive string of digits that you just have to guess. And the fastest way of doing this, RNGs. Just more computational power, run more and more combinations in shorter and shorter periods of time. And what this leads to is a massive buy-up of computational power and its subsequent usage, which obviously is using electricity and obviously has the subsequent implication and effect on the environment. Now, this is the case for, these larger proof of work consensus algorithms. Proof of stake is far less, because proof of stake doesn't have the same puzzle requirements that need to be met, and you're not meeting it in the same way in which you need to contribute all of this computational power to it. So that's helped quite a bit. And you've also now seen the emergence of these layer 2s and these layer 3s on Ethereum that are also helping. But as it relates to AI right now, truly, I couldn't tell you.
Okay. Where do you see the blockchain industry heading in the next 5-10 years?
I think that it's going to become universally applied across all forms of commerce.
I think that soon we're going to be having tokens that are going to represent not only our commerce capabilities, but also our reputations and our standings. Airline miles are going to become now universally deployed throughout just about every product or brand that you've ever engaged with. And the means of tracking and engaging with those rewards is going to be through tokens. We are seeing real estate and real world assets of all shapes and sizes now being tokenized. We are seeing new communities we're seeing tokens being launched to fund new organizations and builds. So I really see a universal application here. And you know, it's going to be unique. And I know, again, for each of these ecosystems and each of these builds, I expect there will be standards and regulatory frameworks that are going to be positioning in the near future. But yeah, if I was to say, where do I see the tech? I think the tech is going to be universally applied. And some of the areas that I'm particularly excited about, DeFi, I think is going to be fascinating. Gaming with metaverses and with NFTs. I mean, my God, the opportunities there. You know, for anybody who's read the book Ready Player One or seen the movie maybe, there is no reason why that can't be created in a metaverse environment where you can have ownership and even start to sell some of those goods, right? Like if we look at games right now, like EVE Online, I was reading something the other day. There was an asteroid or something, or some planet that, you know, some group of guys built out in this game that they sold for $500,000. You know, these are the types of things that are happening right now in Web 2 alternatives. Well, why not put it in a Web 3 environment in which you have ownership now? And so I mean, and especially with the inclusion of AI agents in gaming, I think we are going to see, I mean, people are going to start building the matrix here in the very near future. And you're going to be able to own a lot of stuff within that matrix. And there's an argument.
Better metrics, right?
Oh my, absolutely. No, we're not going to be using people as batteries, I hope, knock on wood. But, you know, the idea here fundamentally, and that, you know, the future we very well could end up seeing ourselves in is a world in which digital value and digital properties carry substantial more value than their IRL counterparts. And I think we're very much on the pathway there.
Nice. And a couple questions. What is Web3? Can you please tell our audience?
Oh, Web3 is just a catch-all term we use to describe blockchain technologies or any applications that are leveraging blockchain technologies. Welcome to Web3, guys.
And also DeFi. Can you
DeFi
elaborate on
is
that?
Sorry?
Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, of course. So DeFi is decentralized finance. So DeFi was a means of achieving what, you know, was initially brought us all to blockchain technology in the first place, which is democratized investment access, democratized commerce access. When it comes to DeFi, and it's also important to note that a number of these DeFi organizations are as of yet unregulated. So important disclaimers for all viewers and parties here. But they will essentially offer you reward and your yield generating opportunities associated with your tokens. So for example, let's say that I'm holding a stable coin. One of these DeFi vaults may say, well, I need a lot of USDC right now because I want to redeploy that USDC somewhere else. And I'm going to create another token that's going to have a pair. And that token is going to give you a yield if you stake your USDC into this pool. Well, right now, these staking pools are earning anywhere from 14 to 18% APY, which is beating the stock market. And it's phenomenal how much these stable yields and vaults are actually providing back. And so, you know, at its core, that's really what DeFi is, right? An ability to invest in an asset that's going to increase in value without being subject to all the requisite KYC, AML requirements, or being an accredited investor, which, you know, bars most people from being able to participate in any style of investment similar to this. Now, again, it is unregulated in large part. And so you may be able to find some of these organizations in which, you know, you can, you know, they might have, you know, certain exemptions in which you can buy the tokens as an unaccredited investor. But in large part, when you're engaging with DeFi, you're doing so at your own risk. And while there are massive earnings opportunities associated with these activities, likewise, there are corresponding loss opportunities, and people have lost a lot of money in this space. So that's a bit of a high level on DeFi there.
Yeah, and speaking about investments, if you can make some suggestions for people who's investing in crypto.
With respect to what?
Like
I put money right now?
How to make investments more safely you know?
Ooh, well, first and foremost, I am not a financial advisor. I need to make that discllmer. So you did.
How you choose the project, you know, like how, like analyzing, you know,
So
like,
I've always applied a fairly unique lens because, for me, I try to follow the technology. What does the tech actually do? How interwound and useful is the token as it relates to the way that this platform is using it? But it's interesting that we've seen, in recent years, it's, there was almost this ethos or this thought process that was in place that, if the underlying product is successful, then the token's value will increase. And that myth has largely been shattered at this point. There are many examples of wildly successful product deployments whose tokens have barely moved. And so, and again, not a financial advisor, but I have really shifted my personal activities towards yield generating activities and yield generating investments. As when you really analyze these markets historically, the only class of asset, not the only, but one of the only classes of assets that largely appreciate and you do see positive returns from are those that have a financial component associated with them. I am investing in a lot. I'm investing in a pool. I'm an LP. So, really anything with DeFi is largely what I have started transitioning my own activities towards. Now, there's pros and cons here. When I'm jumping into these DeFi vaults, I'm getting stable coins, which dramatically reduces my risk, but my upside is capped. As I say, we're looking anywhere 14 to 18%, depending on which vaults that you're deploying your capital into. You're not going to see the 10,000% gains that you might see on a meme coin, which is why meme coins got so big and famous and exciting. But at the same time, you can also lose, 10,000% in an hour. You could lose 100% of your holdings in an hour. That easily on meme coins. It can just drop to zero like that. So, for these reasons, I myself have made the transition. I'm really excited about stables. I'm really excited about the vaults and some of these DeFi solutions that are popping up. There is high risk. These are unregulated markets. So I'm not recommending anybody do anything. But me personally, these have been the areas that I've, begun exploring more heavily.
On the other side, you are also, I know that you're advising people on the projects, and you are making a due diligence of the projects before they make investments, right?
Yes.
And what is the process of checking the project and if it's a safe investment? And why so many people are hiring you to do that?
I worked very closely with Cardone Ventures to establish essentially a diligence framework for some of their blockchain initiatives and investments. And, in large part because there is no standard. It is so easy for a charlatan to walk in and put some calculus equation on a board that 9 out of 10 of your investors aren't going to understand, but is going to make them think, okay, this guy knows what he's talking about. And this is actually there's a specific situation that I'm remembering here where there was a $25 million investment on the table for an organization that on its surface seemed extraordinary. I mean, the relationships with all of the top world changers, I mean, there was no door they couldn't open. They seemed to have fairly healthy capital reserves. Their technology, from what they were saying, seemed extraordinary. And this was why they were sitting at the table in the first place. We then started the diligence process and discovered that basically all of their technology was in its concept stage. Nothing had been built. And they were able to raise substantial amounts of capital on the lie that this technology was in place based on presenting a very complex and very difficult to understand model with random variables that have random associations that 9 out of every 10 people are not going to understand.
but they're going to now have this association of, oh, look how brilliant this person is. They must know what they're talking about. And I wish I could say that this was a one-time thing, but it was not. I mean, the number of times that I've been brought in to conduct diligence on a potential deal that, you know, the investors that are bringing in are like, and this case was no different, where they were like, we love these guys. We want to make this deal, but we need one last check. You are the last check. And then I'll come in and say, and like, this is nonsense. And unfortunately, retail users don't get that same advantage. You know, if these guys had decided that they wanted to do a public pre-sale, they probably would have raised that full $25 million because it looked that good. It really did. It really took, you know, somebody looking behind the curtain, looking at the actual code and realizing that, you know, a lot of the claims that were being made were false. Now, again, unfortunately, this level of diligence isn't available for all parties. So, you know, this isn't the type of thing that, you know, mom and pop are going to be able to do. But the best advice that I think I could really give would be a couple of things. First and foremost, never be the first one. Give a project a good 2 to 3 months to see its historical track record. How is it working? How are they working with their communities? How happy are the token holders? Really, there is no better reflection of the health of an investment than the sentiment of the community. And the best way to get that, guys, jump into Discords, jump into Telegrams. These guys are all public, you know, and they're having the good ones are. The good ones are, because they have nothing to hide. They want you to ask these questions because this allows them to say, look, we're different. We're not like all of these other people out there. And so that's the best advice I could really give is, you know, if you...
In some projects, like, you don't know even who's the founder of the project.
Oh, I mean, most meme coins were undoxed.
Yeah.
Meaning you had no idea who was affiliated with it. So, yeah, I mean, really, I would say the best tool available to you if you want to invest in blockchain technologies, jump into community. Talk to the people in the community. Jump into their Discord channels. Jump into their Telegram channels. Go on Twitter. See how people are commenting. See how happy people are. See how the deployer is responding. And there is really no better reflection of the health of an ecosystem than its community.
Can you tell us more about your involvement in Acoin and the challenges you faced in developing it?
Acoin was an interesting one. So I worked very closely with Acon. I was actually brought in after the first Acoin model went down. So I was kind of brought in as try to, you know, rewrite the ship, so to speak. And you know, Khan is such an amazing guy in that, you know, he really wants to see the world be a better place. And he really wants to uplift Africa specifically. And unfortunately, you know, he was bound, you know, we were bound by a lot of regulatory issues. And unfortunately, a lot of these issues ended up materializing in so far that we couldn't actually offer the token in the way that we wanted to, in a way that would actually create, you know, revenues and values for the people holding it. And, you know, unfortunately, that, you know, largely led us to have to make a key decision. Do we release a subpar token that, you know, will help us, but may very well hurt the community? Or do we decide that we're going to do what we think is going to be best for the health of the community and the Acon city? And we decided to go for the latter. Now, had we not been bound by that landscape, had we been doing this today with the current administration in place, we probably would have moved forward with the original token design, because that token was predicated on creating yields for token holders. And those token holders were going to be largely local population centers across Senegal, Nigeria, Kenya, Ghana, etc. Primarily the nations that were affected by the CFA, which was one of the most predatory financial treaties ever committed to paper by the French, that
And Emmanuel Macron, if you ever see this, do something about this because you can. The CFA is modern day slavery for the people of Senegal, of Ghana, of the regions that are bound by that treaty. And I do hope that one day we will be in a position to be able to actually deploy a token the right way that is not just going to make money for the governments of those countries, which is unfortunately with the direction that we were being pulled in, there was a lot of corruption. And hopefully one day we'll actually be able to deploy this the right way, which is why, you know, it's actually interesting. I was able to learn, you know, take a lot of those lessons from what we were able to do with Acorn and bring them to our projects here. And the foundation of this community-based mission coin yield, you know, that was really foundationally what we were trying to do over there, but you know, we weren't in a position to be able to do so. And now we are. Now mission coins are really hitting the ground running. And, you know, regulatory landscapes may actually put a stop to that too. We don't know. You know, we'll see how the SEC responds. But the prevailing sentiment right now is that we have 4 years to innovate. We have 4 years to challenge the status quo, and we're going to do it. And we're going to see where the chips fall.
What are the key considerations for the businesses looking to implement blockchain?
Why do you need it? That is the most, like, what is the blockchain going to give you that you don't already have right now?
Maybe some people doesn't know, like business owners that doesn't know the potential that they can, you know, the opportunity that.
Sure. And maybe there's a growth opportunity there for them. Maybe there's an inventory management opportunity for them. The question just needs to be, there needs to be a solution. The blockchain cannot be a square peg stuffed into a round hole. It's never going to work. You have to have a solution. You have to have a problem that the blockchain actually solves. So, for example, let's say that you have a logistics company and your shipments are constantly being delayed. You don't need a token, but you could absolutely deploy a smart contract infrastructure that's going to optimize and make your logistics far more efficient. And you'll now be able to see the benefit. And like, there's a very clear reason why I want the blockchain token there. Maybe you're a public facing organization and you want to increase your brand and you want to increase your recognition and exposure. So now you're going to release a token, and that token is going to be a reward incentive tool that's going to reward your users for their participation and their engagement. So it really is unique to whatever it is that you're doing. But the one thing I caution people away from is don't try to use the blockchain if you don't have a clear problem that it's solving. Because 10 out of 10 of those builds are going to fail. It doesn't work. There needs to be a problem that is being solved with, and when that's the case, now you have a strong reason to actually build this out and engage with the technology, and it has a number of values that can be surfaced. But don't just try to slap, you know, a blockchain logo or a name on your company and think that that's going to change your company or your life. It's not how it works.
Speaking about decentralization, because blockchain is about, the big part of the blockchain is decentralization, right?
Yes.
What do you think about full decentralization? Is it possible to have fully decentralized project?
Absolutely. Now it's getting there. It's going to require AI involvement, you know, with agentic AI deployments and MCP and, you know, some of these other protocols. It's becoming far more practical. But yes, the short answer to your question is yes. Now that said, it's incredibly difficult. And it requires a very, very, very robust set of best practices and rules and operating procedures, not the least of which being like, you know, how do you manage dispute resolution, for example? So like, has there been an example of a fully decentralized project yet? Arguably some of the DAOs. Actually, I think Moloch is probably one of the better examples, because it really was just, you know, a couple hundred people around the world with wallets that vote on protocol decisions.
But what about, for example, like American Constitution project, when people voted to burn Constitution?
Oh, yes. Okay. And now we're at that. Okay. Yeah, that's a fair. Well, actually, was that fully decentralized? I thought that was a group of friends that put that together.
Maybe.
I think there was actually a central.
But it might happen, right? If it's fully decentralized.
Sure. It certainly could. And that's, It certainly could, and there's risks, and this is why having that very robust mechanism designed from the onset is so important, right? Because in the case of the Constitution, now these guys literally passed the vote, like it wasn't a joke, like they were going to burn the Constitution of the United States of America. Like there was no two ways about it. Like they were like gasoline, burn it. And this is why there has to be some type of acceptable use criteria when it comes to what are people voting on. But by the very nature of having an overarching criteria, it's been centralized. There is now a central authority that dictates what people do. And if it's not a central authority, if it's a decentralized authority, meaning it's the token holders that are all voting, well, no, I mean, we already saw what happened. The token holders all voted to burn it. So that could very well happen. So these are some of the, pros and cons. And there's a strong argument to be made that a fully decentralized community is actually not the best way to go, because it is very much subject to whale influence, right? If I have more money than you, I can buy more tokens than you, meaning I have an outsized voting share. Now, maybe they have some quadratic voting mechanisms in place that will reduce my share at a certain threshold, but even then, it's very prone to whale manipulations. When you have some central arbiter or some central authority, there's a large argument to be made that this is actually how you create an ecosystem that's architected for longevity, and you can protect the integrity of that ecosystem. But again, then purist decentralized, fanatics are going to start screaming, well, you have a central authority figure. And it's like, all right, yes, kind of, but these are the pros and the cons. And frankly, I don't think that we're the long-term state here is going to be purist. Right? This idea is like, is it fully decentralized? Is it not fully decentralized? It's going to be what works. Right? Like it doesn't necessarily need to be fully decentralized, right? Like there are
still different, yeah.
Oh, fundamentally different.
Right.
Fundamentally different. But there's a lot of ways that you can have, and then largely what I expect is actually going to be what ends up becoming more reflective of these projects is going to be a hybrid approach.
Yeah, and different tiers of decision makers, basically.
Yeah, like Optimism has the two-house collective model, which is phenomenal, and you can take a look at that, and now you have different classes of voting capabilities.
Yeah, it should be based on your reputation and your level of involvement and trust, basically. So
that's exactly right.
I'm personally curious. In your opinion, what is the best blockchain technology, and what is going to be the winning blockchain technology?
So this is only my opinion, but I genuinely think it's going to be Ethereum. Ethereum was built with the express purpose and intention of allowing other applications to be built on top of it. And it has, especially with the emergence of layer 2 and layer 3 solutions, actually solved, a lot of the major congestion issues that they were facing, before some of these innovations were released. And so, you have a technology now that in large part, I would say, kind of galvanized the initial blockchain space. I mean, Bitcoin certainly was the forefather, but as far as the actual Renaissance era of dApp deployments, that was on Ethereum, and in large part still is. I mean, we are seeing a lot of consumer-facing applications that are launching on Solana, but I really am of the opinion that Ethereum is going to become that winning block, if there ever was one, which is a big if. I think it's probably going to be ETH.
Here at Wise, we are very curious and excited about network states.
Yes.
This is something that really people started talking about just a couple of years ago, and we see like a few projects. We cannot say that those are successful yet, and everybody's still learning how to build a proper network state. What is your thoughts about the network states in general, about this concept, about this idea, and do you see the future in this kind of type of projects and community building?
So network states, I think, are really interesting at a concept level because, fundamentally a DAO is a network state, right? This idea that you have a set of shared values, best practices, tenants, codex, whatever the hell you want to call it.
Culture.
Sure, right? That you're just adhere to. Right. And more people the more people that share those values that want to be a part of it can, gain access, and, they can exert their influence. They can vote, they can speak, they can, challenge. So I think that we've already started to see early network states start to get established. I think the challenge that, most of these DAOs and or network states, however you want to define them, have experienced is, how do you operate at scale? When you've got 30 to 300 people, it's manageable. What happens when you have 50,000 people voting on every vote? What happens when you have 100,000 people voting? How do you sift through the noise? How do you manage that massive of a community and make sure that everybody feels seen and heard? And the answer to this largely has been, well, we'll deal with the problem later. Has kind of been the response so far. Now, that said, with the emergence of AI technologies, this has been really interesting because now you have essentially AI models that can jump in and can act as avatars. They can, help guide users through various communities. They can help even create communities. They can act as arbitrators and help with dispute resolution. They can be moderators. They can perform sentiment analysis. I mean, there's no shortage to what these technologies can actually do. And when you're talking about, overseeing and managing, something like a network state, when we're talking about, in an ideal world, even tens of billions of people, you have to have those kinds of frameworks in place. So, I think that the early explorations have already begun. I think a lot of the big challenges that have surfaced thus far really corresponded to how do you manage a community of that scale when they are exerting ownership and influence, and how do you materially resolve disputes between these token holders, and how do you moderate that community? And I think with these emerging AI tools, that's I don't necessarily think that that's going to solve the whole problem, but I think is going to really help move things in a better direction and make things more accessible and achievable. And we'll start to see these larger communities here in the near future.
Do you see the future world as people are building their own communities and community spaces? Let's say if they're aligned with the same values.
Well, this is one of the things that I'm a bit. I mean, it's interesting, right? On the one hand, it's really exciting, right? This idea that you can meet a bunch of people online, digitally, that all share your values and share your ambitions, and you all want to work together to make your visions a reality. And we want to encourage that, but at the same time, there's a line that I think needs to be drawn. And what the analog that I use for this is if we look at the VR space right now, there are, unfortunately for those people out there that don't have shared community in the real world, they live in VR now. And VR is frankly boring as hell right now. You're just running around with like a furry outfit. Like there's nothing to do. But with Metaverse technology, with NFT technology, with AI technology, and all of these being built, we are going to see a Metaverse soon that I expect people aren't going to want to leave. And this is a bit scary for me. And I think this is, one of the reasons why we here at Wise are so heavily focused and emphasize this in real life connection point, as well as the digital, is that, while it's really exciting and encouraging, and I think important to allow people, not allow, but to, create the tools that, allow people to create these shared communities and have these experiences in digital environments. What worries me is as the sophistication of this technology increases, and as, these experiences become indistinguishable from reality, which we are very, very close to, how many people are going to forego the real world for the dream world? And that, I think, is something that we need to be, and we as well as stewards and builders of this technology have to be aware of, and we have to be cognizant of.
But nothing is better than this reality.
I couldn't agree with you more.
Yeah,
but unfortunately,
VR is just like kind of like additional experience, and something to have fun. But we need to really remember that this earth and this reality is the best, and the real connection and the real experiences.
And this is what's so beautiful about Wise and about this community and this ecosystem, is that they really care. It's not just about, I met you at this experience online. Maybe let me. It's like, no, let me go meet you in person. Let's go get a cup of coffee. And it's about creating these values, these shared communities and organizations and groups, both in the digital and the real world. So, we went on a bit of a departure here from the core question of network states and kind of where it gets. But, the long and the short of it being that, network states, I expect, absolutely, we're going to start to see these communities getting developed. And in large part, especially as these technologies begin to advance, I think we're going to see, again, a higher value being placed on digital identity, digital community, digital activations than we do for their real world counterparts. And that's just, a line that we as deployers, as builders, need to navigate. And I mean, this happened in World of Warcraft, right? I mean, Blizzard actually used to have to put out, I was a diehard World of Warcraft player. I remember they used to actually put out disclaimers where they would say, hey, remember, there's a real world out there. Please don't spend all your time here. I mean, people would literally spend days at a time playing these games. Now imagine if my entire community was there. I have no reason to leave now.
I personally treating this life as a game.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Go to check some vortex in Sedona, then go to Bali to experience something.
But that's because you care about the people. You don't care about your bottom line. If you did, you would tell everybody, stay on the digital forever. Never leave. Make more money for us, please. No, that's not how we operate. We want people to live the best lives that they can. And that means that we absolutely focus on IRL activations. That's the entire foundation of experiences. It's create your digital tribe, have your network state, but experience it in the real world.
Right. Yeah, I'm so excited about what we are doing.
Oh, me too, man. Me too.
After this conversation, I feel like it's needed. It's going to bring balance because so many people stuck, in the virtual realms, basically.
Absolutely.
And it's nothing bad about it, but it's like also, it's all about balance.
Well, it gives them an escape. I mean, it's an unfortunate reality that we live in a very disconnected world right now. And I think one of the things that we're so focused on doing here at Wise is recreating those connections. Like there are people out there that you can just go and hang out with and have a beer. There's nothing stopping us from living our best lives right now.
Exactly. Yeah, that's I think why people escaping, because the life in real life is
That's painful.
Painful, yeah. And in virtual life, it's beautiful. It's dream world, as you're saying.
It's dopamine overdrive.
But we have a power to create this dream world here, basically.
Exactly.
And many people living like this, and it's possible. So
and we're literally doing it at Wise Experiences. Like the entire foundation of this is go and experience the world. You want to go to Giza and see the pyramids? Here's a way to do it. You want to go to Antarctica? Here's a way to do it. You want to create a shared community of people who are excited about going and engaging in these real world experiences? Here is that community. This is really the foundation of what please forgive me. I'm gonna put these words in your mouth, but I think these are really the core foundation of what we're trying to do at Wise. Live a life of wisdom.
Exactly. And I have a couple more questions. It's gonna be just quick questions. What does your average day look like?
Wake up, day trade for a couple of hours between 6:30 and 8:30 Pacific time. Do our team sprints and work with the engineers, oversee requirements, map out feature sets. I'll usually have to be pulled in to take a few calls, and that's pretty much my entire day until about 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock at night. So pretty boring.
Okay. What is money to you?
That seems like a very philosophical question. I don't know. That's I guess
That's a really hard. I don't know how to answer that. I guess money is freedom. Is probably how I'll take a more philosophical answer here. I'd say money is freedom. Money allows you to live your life the way you want to without having to bend to other people's rules. I guess.
That's a good answer. Do you believe in the existence of other civilizations?
Absolutely.
Quote me. Quote me.
What are some of the coolest, most interesting things that you've done ever in your life?
Oh shit. Okay. Let's see. Coolest things I've ever done in my life.
Like experiences.
Went on tour with Akon. Was backstage at a Post Malone concert in Qatar at the World Cup. Let's see. I spent a few time. I mean, honestly, basically all of my snowboarding trips, I would put in that category. So like every time I've ever strapped a snowboard to my feet. And then probably the most exciting was with a build that I can't cite the name for, that we had actually made a mistake on our token sale. And we tried to do something a bit different from what everyone else had done. Wanted to do a more market egalitarian sale that essentially consisted of a 2-week bidding period and a 1-week processing period. And over this 2 weeks, people could, essentially commit a bid, like we'll send you, this amount of money and at varying market caps. And when we have 1 week to process all of the bids, we'd aggregate it and then send the tokens out. And we were raising 10 million for this. And 13 days in, we had less than $100,000. So it was the last day.
Yeah.
And we were convinced the model was an absolute failure. We were like, my God, what a disaster. Wow, I can't believe that happened. All right, well, we learned our lesson. Don't do that twice. That day, over the course of like 2 hours, almost $13 million poured in.
Mm-hmm.
And what we realized was the model was great. We forgot to put incentivizing people to contribute early. And when we looked at the model, we realized actually the way that this model was architected, everybody was just incentivized to wait till the very end and then commit all of the capital. And so that was one of the greatest moments of my life, just because of the relief of like, oh my God, thank God. But also the realization of like, oh, okay, mechanism design is very important. let's be smart about how we do this from the onset. Awesome. So I'd say those were some of the highlights.
Nice. And do you believe in reincarnation?
I do, actually. I do.
Do you remember some of your past lives?
I do, but we'll save those for you and I.
Okay.
There's an experience with katanas that keeps on popping up. So I know that I had an experience in ancient Japan.
Amazing. What is the secret of your success?
I'm not afraid to look stupid. It's funny. My brother and I, we had a saying, because we both jumped into blockchain technologies and our parents wanted our heads for it. Because he was a chemical engineer by training, and I was intending on just going, a very corporate route as well. And we had this. I think it was actually like maybe 2 years ago or so. We were sitting with the family. We do family reunions at Christmas every year. And we were just, pulling up the chart, and everybody, at this point, Ethereum was well into the thousands, and, Bitcoin was, I don't remember, it was like close, I was like 60 or something thousand, I don't remember. And it's been, proven at this point. And everybody was like, God, you guys were brilliant. You picked it early, this and that. And we just look at the chart and we go from when the chart began, 2015, we look at the ETH chart, to 2022, it's just basically sideways. For this whole time, we were idiots. But when it hockey stick growth, now we're geniuses. It was patience and perseverance. We didn't really do anything differently than anybody else. We worked, we put our flag in the ground, and we really believed in the technologies that we were building. And, I think that it really was, I didn't give up. And I wasn't afraid to go in front of an audience of people that have never heard of what this blockchain thing is and then tell them this is going to change your lives. All of them looking at me like, what kind of a moron comes over and says it? And it's like, mark my words. This is going to have that impact on you. Patience, really patience, perseverance, and don't be afraid to take a stand. Don't be afraid to look stupid. It happens to all of us.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And the last question is, which areas of your journey spark your curiosity for further exploration?
All of it. Everything. I mean, that's the whole reason I'm doing the things that I do. I made a commitment to myself many years ago that I'm never going to be in the rat race. I'm never going to live a life of chasing other people's dreams. I'm going to do what I am motivated by, I am inspired by. And I've been very fortunate in that I've been able to create that lifestyle. So I would say that, I'm one of those people lucky enough that I get to wake up and be thrilled about everything I do.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Kavon.
Thank you so much, Alex.
It was an amazing conversation, and I hope everybody received a lot of wisdom in terms of how blockchain is useful for to build a harmonious world. Personally, I've been on many conferences, and I interacted with many professionals from the space. But to me, you are the most knowledgeable person. And the way you're explaining things is more clear, because the space is complicated still, and it's a lot of terms and things that people doesn't understand. But yeah, thank you so much for sharing.
I really appreciate you saying that. Thank you. And it's just years of practice.
Yeah, thank you for sharing your wisdom and educating our community on this technology. And I believe that many people can use this technology for good, and we need more good people to come to the space. People who is conscious entrepreneurs and spiritual leaders, even.
Absolutely.
The technology can bring everyone to the next level, basically, and and that's what our mission at Wise as well is, to build this real world solutions by using this technology and some other technologies too. It's all about, just using the best things to create a better future. And again, thank you so much for a nice conversation and answering all questions. Some of them have been not really easy.
But a great conversation. Really appreciated the opportunity. And thanks so much for having me, man.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Always a pleasure.
Wise Talks is delighted to have listeners like you as part of our community. If you enjoyed this episode as much as we enjoyed creating it, please like, subscribe, and share across social and podcast platforms. For more about our company, please visit wisetalks.com. That's W1SEtalks.com. To sponsor an episode or a series, please contact ash@wise.com. That's ASH@W1SE.com.